Our story begins with Hotaru and Goro Kurosaki, a couple that's been married for 2.5 years. But unbeknownst to each other, they're both actually ninjas, as Goro takes advantage of his wife's mourning, strolls to train in secret, while Hotaru, thanks to her ninja training, possesses incredible running speed. They hide this from each other, both thinking they married a normal person, but they both actually belong to rival ninja clans, Hotaru with the Koga clan and Goro with the Iga clan, factions that existed for centuries, but that ended up becoming rivals. Though both factions are against killing and have avoided direct confrontation for a century. And so, Goro and Hotaru try acting normally with each other. But Goro's an unorganized mess and behaves like a child, but Goro, childish, shrugs this off as nothing, which pisses and frustrates Hotaru. Regardless, they later head to work, as Hotaru works as a pharmacist alongside a co-worker named Tomoyo, while Goro works as a mailman in a post office, but which is actually a front for Iga. On the way, he runs into his childhood friend Otonashi, a fellow ninja from Iga, who Goro frustratedly complains to, frustrated at Hotaru complaining too much, but Otonashi later invites him to eat. But it isn't until Hotaru's making lunch that Goro informs her of this, which frustrates her again. Goro and Otonashi, meanwhile, attend a ninja-themed food joint named Ninin, where workers even dance dressed as ninjas. Hotaru, meanwhile, dines alone, talking on the phone with her sister, Suzume, who does ninja-themed shows with cosplays and dances on Instagram. Goro and Otonashi, meanwhile, get served by an eccentric, energetic, and extreme ninja fanatic named Hyomayura, who they end up finding odd, while Hotaru is meanwhile complaining to Suzume about Goro's annoying childish habits, but their sister, Kid, a horse racer, joins the call, who encourages Hotaru to get divorced, which Hotaru's already planned on, while Goro complains to Otonashi about his marriage too, but Otonashi reminds him he can't get divorced, since in Iga it's taboo, and it'd expel his entire family from the clan. Though Goro later tries rekindling their relationship, Hotaru just has him go sleep, finding him gross. The next day, Goro's back at work, but he's asked to mentor a new mailman recruit. But who happens to be Yura, who Goro's frustrated to see, while Yura's seeing Suzume's ninja-themed Instagram livestream, but Goro doesn't know about her, since Hotaru told him she has no family. He later reluctantly teaches Yura to work as a mailman. But meanwhile, Hotaru receives a disguised member of Koga at work, who gives her a mission to get proof of the illegal drug scandal pertaining to a politician named Shosuke Akamaki. But Goro's also entrusted with a mission, as he meets with other Iga members in Iga's headquarters, the Hattori building, where they're told that Joichiro Kazutomi, the son of Josui Kazutomi, Iga's commander-in-chief and current Minister of Environment, has a real chance of becoming Prime Minister in some months, which would fulfill the long-standing wish of the Kazutomi family of having a Prime Minister from Iga. But he has ties with Shosuke Akamaki, who's regardless a member of Iga, who Koga might go after to get dirt from him, since Koga supports the opposition party, so their mission is to protect him. Hotaru meanwhile retrieves weapons and a drone at her father's home, Ryuhei, the former ninja of the family, who Hotaru succeeded. She later returns home, but gets frustrated at seeing that Goro left everything a mess again, and how despite asking for food, he won't eat it because she just made instant curry. So, he instead goes grab pudding, and for her too, but that's when Hotaru sees that he's used a book precious to her as a coaster for his cold drink. Though Goro's not realizing the gravity of the situation and says he'll buy the same book tomorrow, Hotaru gets furious and frustrated, saying that Goro never understands. But they then go back and forth about how Hotaru tried having Goro change but he didn't, while Goro says that he was going to, but that Hotaru's scary personality prevented him from doing so. But he then reminds her of when they first moved in, and he said he'd make this a home where she can't stop smiling, but all he sees from her is anger. But she claims that it's because of him, and hates feeling like this, and tells him they might not able to continue, as she leaves to cry in her room, while Goro's left shocked, as he thinks back on when he first met Hotaru on a camping trip by a lake by accident, while Hotaru thinks on when they got married and when they moved into their home and actually enjoyed each other's company. And Goro remembers having promised to read her treasured book. So the next day, Goro apologizes to Hotaru, claiming he's been too spoiled by her and that he'll change, so Hotaru can smile like before, asking her to restart this by inviting her to eat at the restaurant where he proposed to her 3 years ago, claiming he won't let her down again. Hotaru's doubtful but ends up accepting at 7 p.m. to Goro's joy, who leaves happy to work while Hotaru draws a smile. But today's when Hotaru's plan against Akamaki begins. Thus, it's also when Aiga and Goro have to guard him. So she uses her drone to scout the area. But Aiga takes notice of it, and Goro takes it down with a shuriken. Hotaru's confused as to what happened, but then sees it's 6:10 p.m., so she rushes out for her date. But because of the drone incident, they're forcing everyone from Aiga at Akamaki's home to keep guard until morning, which means Goro will miss his date. As Hotaru's now in the restaurant, thinking on how he said he wouldn't let her down, but she gets texted by him that he couldn't go because of work, and figuring this was all for nothing, she just leaves. The next day, Goro returns home but doesn't find Hotaru there. Instead, he finds a filled-up divorce form to his utter shock. He later frustratedly tells this to Otonashi and that Hotaru's not answering his calls nor texts. But Otonashi tells him that there's good news for him. That's Saya, their childhood friend, granddaughter of Aiga's leader, and who had a crush on Goro, has returned. So he tells Goro that unlike divorce, adultery isn't banned in Aiga, but he refuses to cheat on Hotaru. Later at night, Aiga and Goro are again guarding Akamaki. But at that moment, Akamaki gets suddenly attacked by someone, and Goro notices that no other ninja is replying to him, as we see that a camouflage woman has taken them all down. Otonashi then splits from him and heads inside, while Goro checks outside and finds guards unconscious, apparently drugged, and also sees the camouflage woman try to run away. So he throws a shuriken at her, but she dodges it with incredible speed and escapes, which all leaves Goro shocked. But he then rushes inside to tell Otonashi of this, so they break into Akamaki's basement to find him. And Otonashi finds him dead. But we see that the camouflage woman is Hotaru. Hotaru's temporarily staying in her father's house after asking Goro for the divorce. Suzume's there too, who Hotaru talks about her mission from yesterday, having sneaked inside Akamaki's residence by darting and fighting Aiga's ninjas, and then sneaked into his basement to take photos of evidence against him. But she found him dead there, apparently by poison on the neck. Aiga meanwhile gathers to discuss Akamaki's murder as Goro testifies, mentioning the most likely culprit, the camouflage woman. But he mentions her incredible speed, making him say that it must be a Koga ninja, which appalls everyone. Suzu meanwhile worries that Hotaru will be suspected of the murder, and Hotaru's worried too, and hopes the real culprit's found soon. Though, it's then time for Suzume's Instagram show, which Yura's of course watching, as she teaches about Aiga and Koga, ancient rival ninja schools, and whereas Aiga prioritizes using the body for ninja activities, Koga prioritizes the mind, using more stealthy methods, mentioning they're knowledgeable in medicine, but that they also lead lonely lives. Meanwhile, in Aiga's headquarters, the headquarters chief, Noboru Matsushita, is indignant that Koga could have killed someone, so they entrust Goro in helping find the culprit as the only witness of the supposed Koga ninja. After this, he tries calling Hotaru again, but she's still not answering, frustratingly. At night, Matsushita informs Josui and Saya of the apparent Koga murder against Akamaki, as Joichiro then enters, leading Josui to ask Saya and Matsushita to do their best to protect Joichiro for the upcoming presidential election. Goro meanwhile returns home, but gets sad, seeing that Hotaru's not back. But he gets an idea. And so the next day, when Hotaru arrives at work, she's surprised to see Goro there, talking with Tomoyo, as Hotaru then drags him away from there, to a park, where Goro tries begging for her to come back, claiming he's useless without her and will do his best to stop being a mess, though he then has to promptly leave for work, but promises he'll change for her. But Hotaru's still frustrated by him. Later, Goro asks Matsushita to let him conduct the next mail delivery around Akamaki's home to try and find clues from the neighbors, which Matsushita accepts, but with one condition: to take Yura with him. So, he accepts as Goro begins asking neighbors questions alongside Yura, who to his surprise actually helps with his eccentric personality, and hear that someone saw the drone. Though they didn't get much info, Goro sees that Yura asked about the drone online, which pisses him off. Though, someone replied that they'd also seen the drone, so he'll wait for an answer to that reply. Meanwhile, Hotaru talks with her dad about Aiga's search for Akamaki's killer, while she's still not reading Goro's texts, which he notices at home, frustrated again. But he then sees his mess and decides to clean up the house and sends texts and photos to Hotaru, which she still ignores. At night, they both try sleeping by themselves, with Hotaru hating her Fuden and Goro being depressed at his wife not being here. The next day, Aiga holds a meeting again, as thanks to Akamaki's autopsy, they've seen that Akamaki apparently wasn't poisoned, despite the mark on his neck, but figure it's thanks to Koga and their adept knowledge of medicine they were able to mask it. So everyone's instructed to capture the camouflage woman. Though, as Goro later tries leaving home, Otonashi has him accompany him for lunch because he has a surprise for him. Meanwhile, Hotaru gets visited by Kid and Suzume and talk about Hotaru divorcing Goro. Though, Kid then sees Hotaru's phone and ends up opening Goro's unread chat to Hotaru's distress. Though Hotaru then sees that Goro's texted her all these days of everything that he's doing, like cleaning their home and how he misses her, which draws a smile from her. But at that moment, Suzume shows Kid an awful ninja dance on Instagram from Yura, but sees it's from a restaurant called Ninin, so they decide to go and bring Hotaru with them. But Goro and Otonashi are eating there, and as Goro gets shockingly surprised by seeing that Hotaru finally read his texts, Hotaru and her sisters arrive, where Kid and Suzume recognize Yura from the Instagram, though they can't spot Goro. But Saya suddenly arrives and approaches Goro, who's surprised seeing her, as it was Otonashi's idea for her to come. But at that moment, as Hotaru's gotten happy at Goro's texts, she suddenly decided to go to her home, leaving Kid and Suzume here, though Yura thinks he's seen Suzume before, but she sends him away. Though, Otonashi's meanwhile trying to hook Goro up with Saya, revealing to her that he's getting divorced, but also flat out reveals that Goro's first love was Saya, which shocks Goro, as Saya's left staring at him. While Hotaru's then arrived home, but sees that Goro's not here, wondering where he is, only to see that inside's a mess. But she sees her treasured book, which reminds her of Goro, but she now instead draws a smile. But at that moment, Goro's heading home, but in a shared cab with Saya, since their places are in the same direction. But when he arrives home, Hotaru hears Goro from inside the house talking to a woman, who Hotaru hears telling Goro that he was also her first love, leaving Hotaru shocked. Saya then leaves, with Goro left surprised, though he then gets happy seeing that Hotaru's back home, but who's now angry instead, now saying she just came for the divorce papers. But as Goro tries pleading to her that despite everything he doesn't want to divorce her and that he'll change, Hotaru remains firm. Goro then just drops onto the floor and cries, reluctantly saying he'll sign the papers, and Hotaru, who fights back tears, decides to leave. The next day, Otonashi sees Goro depressed, but they then get summoned for a mission, while Hotaru also receives one from another disguised Koga ninja, as Goro and others are told that they'll lure Koga out with a false bombing threat against a politician, and Hotaru sees that her mission is to stop that bomb threat. Aiga's conducting a false bomb threat at a charity event against Tomoyatsu Buzen, the leader of the political party that Koga supports, to lure out Akamaki's killer, or at the least, capture whoever shows up from Koga. Aiga ninjas will attend under the guise of volunteers from the post office, dressed properly, but they have to bring their families to Goro's frustration. Meanwhile, Hotaru reviews her mission to stop the bomb threat, which Suzume and their father see, but he warns that this could be an Aiga trap, but not to capture, but kill Hotaru as revenge for killing an Aiga member. But Hotaru will still go through with the plan, though she still doesn't know how she'll get in the party. Meanwhile, Goro's frustrated, again, because he has to contact Hotaru, but anxious. So he later tries to visit her at work, but he's scared. But Tomoyo notices him outside, loudly, and Hotaru notices this. She ends up walking with him, where he begs her to accompany him to the charity event. And to his surprise, she accepts, because she can now infiltrate in the event without suspicion, which makes Goro very happy and hopeful. But Hotaru just then leaves, ignoring him again. Later, Hotaru's in her dad's home, packing her things as she'll return home momentarily with Goro. But that's when a Koga ninja knocks on their door, thanks to Ritohei, who requested info on Aiga's bomb's manufacturer, as Hotaru's given the directions of said person, and so she promptly goes after them. Afterwards, in the morning, Hotaru returns to her home, which makes Goro extremely happy, though he notices she has a bruise on her forehead, which she excuses as having hit a wall. But Goro, despite Hotaru's insistence, puts a gauze on her forehead himself, which eases her mood. Though, Goro's stomach's then growling, so she ends up making food as Goro intently watches her and finds her food delicious, which makes her hide a smile. Though it doesn't stop her from having him sleep on the couch, which leaves Goro, yet again, frustrated. Though, Hotaru then sneaks out camouflage during the night. Meanwhile, Saya meets with Josui, but because she's heard that, instead of a fake bomb, they're planting a real one. Though Josui says it must have been Matsushida's idea, Saya begs her grandfather to stop this, but he just tells Saya to deal with it herself, but expects it's done in the best way for Aiga, which she knows means to not do anything about it. And so, as the bomb's in position in the stage, the next day, the charity event takes place, with Goro arriving with Hotaru, where they meet with Goro's co-workers and families, including Otonashi's wife, Megumi, and their daughter, Anzu. Otonashi then gathers the Aiga ninjas, starting their mission, but which they still think it's a false bomb threat. Though then, in the party, everyone sees Anzu on top of a tree, and she suddenly falls. But Hotaru uses her incredible speed to quickly catch her. They're relieved, but Goro points out how she ran that quickly, but Hotaru claims that's nonsense. Though, Goro then sees that Yura's also here and gets confused, but Yura explains that his parents are rich, so he came to bid in their behalf. But then, we see that Suzun's also infiltrated the party as a waiter, but unbeknownst to Hotaru. Though who ends up busting her anyways, but Hotaru reveals to her that she found and defused the bomb yesterday, after forcing its manufacturer to talk the previous night, though she still figures that Aiga's here. Though while this happens, Goro's approached by Saya, who then introduces herself to Hotaru, but she remembers that voice as the one from the girl from the taxi who told Goro that he was her first love. But Hotaru just acts friendly regardless, but internally she's displeased and jealous. Though, Goro's then called by Otonashi, alongside Saya, as Otonashi informs that he's received news that the bomb is actually real. Goro's shocked, but Saya remains firm, claiming this is for the good of Aiga. Tomoyatsu meanwhile arrives at the event, while Goro's then pleading to Otonashi to stop this, who's also against this, but they can't disobey orders. And so, Tomoyatsu takes the stage, where the bomb's supposed to be, as Hotaru, Suzun, Goro, and Otonashi watch, all wary. And when the timer hits 0, the bomb doesn't go off. Hotaru and Suzun are relieved, while Goro and Otonashi are confused. But Goro and his teammates are then told by Saya that a backup bomb will explode in 5 minutes, where Tomoyatsu will take photos at, to their shock. As Suzun warns Hotaru that their dad got more info, that another bomb was planted and will explode soon. And with 1 minute left, Hotaru rushes to try to stop it. But Goro sees her rushing towards where the bomb will explode, so he promptly jumps at her to protect her, as the bomb then goes off, but mid-air. Goro's relieved that Hotaru's alright and then goes check what happened, while Hotaru's left staring at him after his brave act. Later, Suzumi meets with Hotaru, and she reveals she's who cleared the bomb away, to Hotaru's shock, having reached it in time, and threw it into the air after narrowly escaping from the party security, which included Otonashi, as she reveals that their dad came here and gave her a handwritten map of the bomb. Later, after the police arrive, Hotaru leaves home with Goro, though she's limping due to Goro's save, so she reluctantly accepts Goro's offer to ride on his back, as she remembers Goro bravely saving her, and also another time when he saved her from a falling branch, which makes her smile. He later puts a gauze on her leg and apologizes for everything about today, but she says this wasn't his fault. And as she then leaves to change clothes, she thanks Goro for his help, though he didn't quite hear her, but she regardless smiles. Though, Goro then accidentally hits her purse, and it drops its contents. Among them, the handwritten map of the bomb. But at that moment, Hotaru's now wondering, how is it that Goro saved her before the bomb even exploded? While Goro's seeing her map, and they both wonder if the other knew about the bomb. Hotaru and Goro don't know what to make of this. So, Hotaru goes inspect, as Goro saves everything back in her purse, and both try to act natural, but are still suspicious. So, they both decide they have to find out, as Hotaru then casually asks how did he save her coincidentally right before the bomb exploded. Goro's nervous, but comes up with explaining that the panel was about to fall over, which Hotaru figures almost happened during Suzume's confrontation with Goro's co-workers with the bomb, so she ends up believing him. Though, Goro then talks about having seen her map from her purse that led to the panel with the bomb. Hotaru's nervous, but she comes up with explaining that people from the venue told her that place was a shining spot to take a photo at. And Goro ends up believing her, with both ending up relieved. Meanwhile, Otonashi's reviewing the security footage from the event for a detailed report in his home. But he suddenly sees something that shocks him. His wife notices his expression and tries asking what's wrong, but Otonashi suddenly tells her to shut up and not interfere, as he then suddenly leaves with his laptop. The next day though, Goro's called by the post office's chief, who says that Otonashi missed work and isn't answering his calls, and now he's suspected of being who told Koga about the bomb and might be hiding evidence from the footage. But Goro claims he'll find him and enlists Yura's help for it. But in the meanwhile, Hotaru gets a visit from Otonashi's wife, Megumi, and their daughter Anzu, as Megumi says that Otonashi hasn't been home since last night and even missed work and is worried. Goro meanwhile talks to Saida about Otonashi's situation, but he then gets called by Hotaru, telling him that Otonashi's wife and daughter came here and that Megumi told her about Otonashi's disappearance, with her being uneasy staying home, so Hotaru will stay with her for now. Meanwhile, Yura's actually found Otonashi's Instagram account and shows that he's posted a video near an incineration plant, which Yura's tracked down. Goro's amazed and promptly drags him there. Though while this happens, Hotaru's suddenly then visited by Saya, who came to see Megumi, explaining that Goro told her she was here, as Hotaru internally asks why is Goro talking to this woman, while Saya tries comforting Megumi that Goro will definitely find Otonashi, recalling how he'd always find her in hide and seek, which is irking Hotaru. But Saya's actually showing Megumi questions from her phone about if Otonashi took his computer with him, which she affirms, and if Hotaru's noticed about Aiga, which she denies. Goro meanwhile arrives with Yura to the place in Otonashi's video, but he isn't there, to their frustration. Hotaru meanwhile's made snacks for her guests, though Saya then has Megumi talk about what happened yesterday with Otonashi, as Megumi says that Otonashi strangely told her to shut up, but she didn't answer back because she was raised with the idea of having to serve men, which catches Hotaru off guard, but Saya says it's the same with her because of Aiga, where women are supposed to serve men, but she's fighting this back by working to produce results in her work to be recognized. Though they then talk about marriage, as Hotaru says hers wasn't supposed to be like this, with both she and Goro dissatisfied with each other, as Saya just listens. Though, Megumi then claims she's never fought with Otonashi, to Hotaru and Saya's surprise, but Megumi says she just can't bring herself to truly act angry on the outside with him despite feeling like it, and says to envy Hotaru. Goro meanwhile tries finding Otonashi everywhere, but it's useless. But he then gets texted by Yura that he saw multiple posts from Otonashi from a memorial site, which Goro recognizes and decides to rush there. Hotaru's meanwhile seeing Saya off, but she suddenly asks Hotaru if she knows Goro's true form, as Saya claims to know it. But Hotaru's confused and wonders if this is a threat, but Saya then just leaves. Goro meanwhile arrives at the memorial site and finally finds Otonashi there, explaining to the surprised Otonashi that he remembers being here as kids when Otonashi was frustrated at being a ninja, but Goro said he'd be by his side if he ran away. Goro then informs Hotaru that he found Otonashi, but that he'll first talk to him before bringing him back. As Otonashi then shows him his issue with the security footage, that he was left funnily smiling at a woman who called him a nice person, and he can't show this because it's too pathetic, which Goro finds silly. But at that moment, Ryuhei pays a surprise sneaky visit to Hotaru, who wanted to see her house, but then asks his daughter if instead of succeeding him as the family ninja, if she wanted to live a normal life, which is why she married a normal person. Though, Hotaru says that, even despite that, she couldn't have a normal marriage. Though Ryuhei then has to leave, as Anzu calls to Hotaru. While simultaneously, Otonashi talks to Goro are now talking about how they wanted to come from normal families, which is why Goro married a normal person. As Otonashi then claims that even if he tried to escape, he's part of Iga and has a family, and says to be envious of Hotaru, who he says is living having fun. Though, they then get hungry, so they go to Ninin, but which Suzume later visits again with Kade. But Suzume spots Yura talking to Goro and Otonashi, who she gets worried of seeing, recognizing him as who she encountered when she stopped the bomb. And she tells Hotaru through a call that Goro's here alongside this person, so she heads there. But at that moment, Matsushita informs Saya and other Iga members about how their bomb manufacturer was attacked by a woman, who must have defused the bomb, and who must be Koda. But Saya's relieved that Otonashi's cleared as a snitch and tells this to Goro. Though, he and Otonashi get a surprise visit by Hotaru and Megumi. Hotaru's angry at Otonashi for not caring how Megumi would have felt if he disappeared. But as Otonashi claims that she doesn't know how Megumi truly feels, Megumi instead claims he's the one who doesn't, as Otonashi's taken by surprise, as she lists things he doesn't know about her despite living together for years, claiming she has no choice but to hide how she is to please him, but yells at him to not underestimate her, but tells him, teary-eyed, that if it's for him and their daughter, she'll do her best because they're family. And this makes Otonashi apologize to her. And after Hotaru sees her sisters leave, she sees Otonashi leave with his family, as she then leaves with Goro. But they then talk about being their true selves with each other too, though Hotaru finds that there's many difficult things on the way. But Goro asks her if she wants to start over, claiming he wants to make a real effort this time to stay married to her. But as she's not answering, he says she doesn't have to reply now, which she agrees on. Though, Hotaru then asks what's his relationship with Saya, but he says there's nothing. The next day though, Goro gets summoned by Matsushita, saying they found street camera footage of the potential culprit behind Akamaki's assassination, and wants Goro to confirm it's the same person. But in it, Goro sees her do an odd movement with her feet, which takes him completely aback. Though as he excuses himself saying it's not enough footage, he's then completely shocked. Because that feet gesture is one that Hotaru does, and now wonders if Hotaru is from Koga. Hotaru's agreed to stay home, under the excuse that her bed's comfortable. But as she goes by Chicken, she's approached by a Koga ninja, who hands her an envelope. But it's at that time that Goro's now suspecting of her being the Koga ninja who killed Akamaki. After work, he receives a message from Hotaru asking when will he be back, but he's frustrated, worried, and confused, so he instead goes to Ninin and tries thinking what Hotaru was doing in key days, like when Akamaki got murdered and the charity event bombing, but can't focus. Meanwhile though, Hotaru got frustrated at waiting for Goro to cook, so she decided to not wait anymore. But at that moment, Suzume calls her that a hospital called her, saying that Kade was unconscious, as Hotaru's in disbelief and rushes out, but finds Goro outside, who is just thinking on feigning ignorance to assess Hotaru. But she says she's going to see someone who treated her like a sister at a hospital, but alone, leaving incredibly quickly, which reminds Goro of the culprit's incredible speed. Inside his home though, he opens a secret ninja room in his living room. Hotaru's meanwhile arrived at the hospital, being told that Kade fell into shock due to a reaction to bee poison, and now all they can do is wait for her to wake up. But at that moment, Goro's reading a book from his ninja room that reads that Koga's well-versed in medicine and poison, and that in these times they now employ pharmaceuticals, which is where Hotaru works at. But he also reads about a secret technique that allows someone to absorb and revive cells called the art of survival. Though Goro thinks it's nonsense, that's the technique Hotaru wants to use on Kade, but she doesn't know how to do it, but their father does, who's just promptly arrived. Though, he claims he can't do it because he used it once and can't be used again as it damages one's body. Though Hotaru asks to be taught it, he says that it can't be used on Kade anymore because she's who he used it on 25 years ago, which Hotaru knows is the year their mom died, but of a supposed heart attack, making her ask if their mom was murdered. So Ryuhei gets on his knees and tells them that 25 years ago, Koga entrusted him with a mission to get dirt on an Iga politician named Sato with a scarred hand, so Kova's party would succeed. Ryuhei succeeded, but a year and a half later, he found his wife and kid poisoned in his living room. His wife claimed it was Sato who did this, and after seeing that Suzume and Hotaru were in their room, Ryuhei was now faced with only being able to use the art of survival once, but his wife told him to use it on Kade. Without another option, he did it and saved Kade's life, but his wife passed away. Ryuhei apologizes for not telling the truth, but explains he didn't want Kade to feel responsible, but also that he wasn't able to track Sato down, but he claims he will. Though, Kade then wakes up, to their relief, but she heard Ryuhei's story, and she ends up blaming herself for not training much, like when her mother told her to, that she couldn't save her, but that her mother also told her their parents would protect her, which they did, and thanks her father, which makes Ryuhei emotional. Later, Suzume leaves after accompanying Hotaru and Ryuhei to his home, but Ryuhei wants to talk to Hotaru and tells her she can stop being a ninja, so her missions don't endanger her family. But she refuses this, claiming that she proudly accepted to succeed him knowing the risks, asking him to let her protect their family, just like her parents did. Ryuhei understands, and so, he now gives her the secret book with how to do the art of survival, as he tells her that despite Koga's tradition being acting individually, she's not alone. Though, he then gives her a report he got from Koga that shows where the descendants of Iga reside now. The post office where Goro works at. Ryuhei's suspicious of him, but though Hotaru finds this impossible, he tells her to not underestimate Iga. Meanwhile, Saya tells Josui of the camouflage woman's footage, but after she's left, he's struggling to stand up, and remembers a doctor saying that he has 3 months left to live. But meanwhile, Hotaru arrives back home, wary of Goro, who quickly closes his ninja room before Hotaru notices and acts asleep, as both wonder if they're both from their rival clans. So, Hotaru wonders if he'd kick him to see how he reacts, while he feels a murderous aura and wonders if he'd react. But Hotaru doesn't go for it. Though they then try sleeping, they're still anxious. But the next day, they act way too suspiciously happy with each other, while both decide they have to find the truth after work. So, Hotaru plants a tracking device in his jacket, as he later meets with Otonashi, who hands him a hard drive, as Goro then leaves to a cyber cafe, because the hard drive contains footage from the charity event, and in it, sees Hotaru running from far away towards the stage way before the bomb went off. And paired with the handwritten map of the bomb's location he found in her purse, he realizes that Hotaru is a Koga member, after all, to his disbelief. But Hotaru meanwhile sees that his location is not the post office, but a cyber cafe, so she goes trail him. But she ends up finding him with Saya, who's just approached him, and she's shocked, wondering if he's not a ninja but a cheater, and sees them enter a building. But it's the Hattori building, as Otonashi then enters it, as she's left wondering that this could be Iga's base. Though she still has doubts, she returns home, but there, she sees a rug, in between her shelves somehow. And as Saya sees Goro looking worried in their meeting, Hotaru finds Goro's secret ninja room, to her shock. And both of them now know they belong to the rival clans Iga and Koga, and they have no choice but to put an end to this. Though they text each other that they'll dine together, Hotaru draws out hidden weapons from her kitchen, while Goro gets a hidden knife from a pot, and they then greet each other, both smiling and hiding weapons behind their backs. Both Hotaru and Goro think they have no choice but to put an end to this. But first, they dine, with fake smiles, but since Hotaru's making roast beef, Goro's favorite meal, which she only makes on rare occasions, and so Goro acts suspicious, they both wonder if they know they're from their rival clans, wondering when they found out if so. The roast beef's then ready, but Goro acts nervous, fearing it's poison, and Hotaru notices, which makes her internally chuckle. But she eases his nerves by taking the first bite. They afterwards try keeping acting normal, but Hotaru then claims she'll sleep on the couch today, which Goro quickly accepts. Though they both then look at their weapons, Saya texts Goro if he's okay after having seen him off, but he says to be fine. And after Hotaru sees her treasured book again, they both end up going to sleep, but knowing that tomorrow is the end. And truthfully enough, Hotaru gets promptly attacked by Goro in the morning, and they both fight, with Goro surprised at her strength, as they battle with similar skill. but a mailman suddenly visits them with a crab delivery Hotaru was waiting for from Suzu and ends making a small truce to get them. Though which Hotaru quickly breaks after saving it in the fridge, and they continue their battle. But Goro then sneakily has her in a chokehold, and they agree to ask each other questions, which leads to them to reveal things, as he has Hotaru affirm she's a ninja from Koga, but the chokehold then reverses, and Goro reveals he's from Iga. Though, Hotaru claims she didn't kill Akamaki, and instead found him dead already, meaning she's not the culprit. Goro then reveals he's the only one who knows she's from Koga, but he then slams her against the shelf and asks why did Hotaru marry him. But she says she wanted to marry a normal person, and Goro reveals that was his intention too. But alas, they aren't normal. Hotaru then restrains him and asks why didn't he agree to the divorce, so he explains that divorce is taboo within Iga, which Hotaru finds old and pathetic. They then reveal they noticed they were from their rival clans yesterday, but Hotaru laughs as he's hit it so well. But they have no choice but to settle this now. But meanwhile, Saya's reviewing the footage of the camouflage woman and sees her partially unmasked. And paired with Goro's surprised reaction from yesterday, she realizes, to her disbelief, that this is Hotaru. Meanwhile, Ryuhei gets visited by a Koga ninja, with results from their investigation on Iga and their post office members. And among them, sees Goro, to his utter anger. Hotaru's meanwhile fiercely fighting Goro, but Suzume's suddenly trying to call her, as Hotaru reveals she actually has a family, to Goro's surprise, but their fight still continues. Until Otonashi and his family ring on their doorbell, because Otonashi's brought a present for them. So Goro calls a truce with Hotaru, to not raise suspicions with Otonashi, revealing he's a ninja from Iga, alongside Megumi. Hotaru's shocked, because she thinks everyone from Iga is inherently awful, while Megumi was genuinely kind. But Goro manages to get her to agree, as Goro tidies the place up and Hotaru receives them. Though, Anzu suddenly spots on the floor and throws an object at Hotaru, which she quickly reflects and Goro catches. One of his shurikens, to their shock, which they hide away from Otonashi, claiming it's just some metal. Meanwhile, Otonashi and Megumi give Goro and Hotaru matching bowls. Though as they ironically laugh at each other, Otonashi claims that they're actually in a good mood with each other, unlike the other day. Though, Anzu then asks for orange juice with ice, but there's no ice, so Goro says he'll go buy it, and Anzu decides to accompany him. Megumi meanwhile has fun talking with Hotaru, while Otonashi can't bear being away from Anzu this long, though which makes he and Megumi bicker, which Hotaru finds funny and nice, being glad that Megumi's now saying her mind, as Megumi says she admires her and Goro for talking their mind. Though as Hotaru appears off at this, Otonashi notices it, so he instead changes topics, revealing that he objected Goro marrying her at first because he thought she wouldn't be a good match. But that Goro said, "If it's Hotaru, I'll be fine," and now realizes they belong to each other. Though Hotaru doesn't reply to this, but is left thoughtful about it. Afterwards, she and Goro see Otonashi and his family off, as they both find Anzu cute, and Goro says things maybe would have been different if they had children. But to which Hotaru says that a children of Iga and Koga can't happen, which Goro figures it's true. They then enter their home, and with their truce now over, they fight again, up until the night, where they both end up exhausted in different rooms. But Hotaru begins remembering of they when first moved in, and were in love, while Goro reminisces on when they did an indoors camping, and they had fun together. But Hotaru then remembers them verbally fighting over him being inconsiderate regarding her precious book. But Goro remembers that, after that, he went and hugged her, and apologized, which made Hotaru cry as she clung to him. But they're conflicted, with both being from rival clans, and recognize they have a duty to fulfill. While Goro and Hotaru engage in battle again, wrecking their living room, which they once shared as a married couple. But that's when Goro suddenly tells Hotaru that he likes her. Hotaru's surprised, but then tries telling him not to be stupid, but Goro stops her, and she kisses him. As they both then collapse of exhaustion, and they end up kissing each other passionately. After fighting and kissing, Goro and Hotaru just laugh now. They then acknowledge their situation, both being active ninjas from Iga and Koga, so Goro asks about Akamaki's murder, with Hotaru revealing she just went to collect evidence against him, but found him dead instead. And she's also surprised that Goro's who threw the shuriken at her. But Hotaru then asks about the bomb attack from the charity event, but Goro explains he was told at first it was a dud to lure Hotaru out, but it changed due to orders from above for some reason, as Hotaru reveals she's who disarmed the bomb, but just says the one who threw the second bomb midair is a random ninja to hide Suzume's identity. Though, Goro then finds out she's who flew the drone the same day as their date, explaining that this is why he couldn't attend, revealing he was protecting Akamaki that day, and asks if had he gone, if she wouldn't have asked for the divorce. But Hotaru just says that that's what ended up happening, and asks him if he thinks that Iga and Koga can stay married. But Goro says he wants to continue with her. Though when he asks her what does she want, she's fallen asleep on his shoulder. Meanwhile, Saya's back at Ninin and recalls having told Josui that she's got a potential suspect on Akamaki's murderer and will come back after she's confirmed it, doing this to have Josui choose her as her successor as Iga's commander-in-chief, which he's implied plenty that he would. But she's conflicted. Though meanwhile, Suzume's hanging out with her friends, but someone suddenly bumps into her, making her bag fall, but that person just returns it. But when Suzume then sees her Instagram comments, she sees one of someone named Shuriken_2031 threatening her, which worries her and fears it's someone stalking her. Back with Goro and Hotaru though, it's now morning, and Hotaru's surprised to see that Goro cleaned up everything by himself. But Goro then says they both should search for Akamaki's real killer, so Iga stops going after her. Hotaru hugs him, as they both apologize for what happened, and they embrace each other. They later head to their jobs, but in the meanwhile, Suzume sees again creepy comments from the shuriken user. But at that moment, someone's following her in the streets. Yura though angrily sees these comments meanwhile, showing them to Goro too, and claims he'll do something about it. Meanwhile though, Hotaru's on her break, but she gets approached by a Koga ninja who gives her a mission card and warns her that the enemy is watching. As she's then suddenly approached by Saya, she takes her to talk, while Hotaru suspects she's from Iga due to her relationship with Goro, and Saya asks questions insinuating how she's tall and has long legs that can run fast, with Hotaru knowing she suspects of her as Akamaki's murderer from Koga. But Hotaru instead asks her about what she meant when he said Goro's true form. Saya laughs, just saying she used to like him. But she then asks if Hotaru will divorce Goro. But she tells Saya that recently, she's changed her mind and wants to stay with him, so she'll try her best. But Saya asks that, if they're no longer together after this, if it's off for her to be with Goro. But Hotaru just tells her to ask Goro instead. Hotaru then leaves and wonders if this was a warning that Hotaru will be forced away from Goro after her Koga links come to light. Cade though then calls her, telling her that Suzume's being apparently stalked and might be Iga since it's a user named Shuriken, maybe having found out she was the waiter who stopped the bomb at the charity event, so Hotaru decides she'll handle this. Though, because of the stalker, Suzume's decided to move to her father's place, but she finds Hotaru there instead, as Ryuhei left to train, but explains she knows of her stalker, so she invites Suzume to her home instead. Though, this stalker is still following her. Meanwhile, Goro re-reviews Akamaki's case, which Saya notices, but she then asks about Goro's divorce, and he reveals he's not getting divorced anymore because he's understood that he's useless without Hotaru, and Saya's left holding back emotions at this. Though she's then summoned by Matsushita, who shows her the security footage from the charity event, having spotted the waiter who stopped the explosion, who didn't show up leaving the building. And so she says it must be Koga, who are masters at disguise. Meanwhile, Suzume is with Hotaru in her home now, cooking crabs, but she wonders how the stalker from her comments knows so much about her. But we see it's because that stalker put a tracking device in her bag after she dropped it after bumping into her. And this stalker's right outside, though who hides after seeing Goro arrive. While Goro's surprised to see Hotaru's sister, and Hotaru privately tells him that they must act normal in front of her, and that she'll stay here for some time due to a stalker, which Goro accepts. They all then eat together, and Suzume gets along very well with Goro. And Goro later ends up drunk as Hotaru takes him to sleep on the couch. Though after this, Suzume asks Hotaru if Iga is after her because of the bomb, but she assures Suzume she'll protect her. But unbeknownst to them, Goro's listening. Meanwhile, Saya reviews the security footage from the charity event by herself, but notices a blonde woman leaving the event, adjusting her hair, just like the Koga ninja did. The next day though, Hotaru and Goro leave to their jobs, leaving Suzume alone at home. Though then, Goro tells Hotaru that he heard their conversation last night and says that he doubts it's Iga who's following her, because Iga is old-fashioned and wouldn't threat someone over the internet, but he'll try to get information regardless from an acquaintance. Though, Hotaru figures he means Saya and reveals they met yesterday, and that she's being watched by her, first out of jealousy, but now because she suspects she's from Koga, to Goro's shock. And true enough, Saya's right now seeing her from afar. Later, Goro's hesitant about asking Saya now, though Yura then suddenly tells him that he contacted his favorite ninja Instagrammer stalker on DMs by acting friendly, and they revealed that they'd put a GPS in her bag. Goro's shocked, so he rushes out and promptly tells Hotaru that there's a GPS in Suzume's bag and that she's in danger. They both rush home, but when Goro later calls Suzume, he finds out she went outside to buy something. But at that moment, the stalker approaches her, steals her phone, and chases her, ending up cornering her and pulls out a knife. But Hotaru just arrives, disarms him with a shuriken, and takes him down. As Goro then also arrives, and Hotaru explains she tracked her GPS location from her phone. The stalker's later arrested, and Hotaru thanks Goro, though he reveals this was all thanks to Yura. She then accompanies Suzume to the police station, but we see that Saya was there, watching. After declaring to the police, Suzume's gone to Ninin to thank Yura and then leaves, doing her signature goodbye sign from her Instagram, as he ends up wondering if she's the Instagram ninja. Meanwhile though, Saya summoned Otonashi in their headquarters, revealing to him that she's determined that Hotaru's from Koga, to his utter shock. Though he asks what'll happen to Goro, Saya claims that there's only sanctions for those who break the rules of Iga. And so, as Goro and Hotaru relax after dining and are about to kiss, Hotaru gets suddenly called by someone. But she just hears Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which in Koga means, "It's dangerous, run away." Goro's shocked, but as Hotaru tries leaving, they suddenly see they're visited by Otonashi and Saya. Saya tells Goro she has something to talk with him, so Goro's let them in, trying to act unsuspicious, while Hotaru's hiding upstairs, hearing from above, as he says she left to eat with friends. But Saya then asks Goro to confirm that Hotaru's the Koga ninja who murdered Akamaki, mentioning how he looked odd after seeing the footage of the camouflage woman the other day, and noticed she shares features with Hotaru, and that she also recorded Hotaru fighting Suzume's stalker with ninja techniques, and that she then hugged who she defended from him, who she claims is the one who stopped the bomb at the charity event. Though Goro actually comes up with excuses to all of this, Saya's not having it, but Goro still vehemently refuses to say that Hotaru's from Koga. But Saya figures she's here, so she and Otonashi search the place. Goro's nervous, but they find no one, because Hotaru escaped. Though Saya warns Goro and that he and his parents will end up punished if he's indeed protecting someone from Koga, Goro asks for time, saying he wants to hear from Hotaru firsthand. Otonashi asks for that too, but Saya wants to know what he'd do if Hotaru's from Koga. So, he says he'll put her down, as he's Iga. So Saya accepts, expecting his results in 24 hours. Hotaru's meanwhile gone to her dad's place, who apparently isn't home, as Goro then calls her, saying he's bought himself 24 hours and that he'll go to where she is. But as he's arrived to her place's home, Ryuhei suddenly shows up and headlocks him, saying he's a ninja from Iga, but Hotaru says she knew already. Goro's surprised to meet her father though, but he demands them to divorce. But Goro refuses, saying he can't part ways with Hotaru, making her smile and telling her dad to please listen. Meanwhile though, Saya returns home, but finds Joichiro unconscious and bleeding from his mouth. She and Josui take him to the hospital, where she finds out that her father was sick, which Josui knew, because the 3 months left to live report he got was actually about Joichiro, who has stage IV cancer. Josui, though, claims he's looking for anything that can help extend his life, even a little. Back with Ryuhei, he says to have understood the situation, but still doesn't accept it, reminding her his one rule he had for her getting married, to not marry anyone from Iga. saying that their clan's rivalries won't just wane away, and much less now with Koga suspected of having killed an Iga member. Hotaru and Goro then go take a stroll, frustrated, as Goro says that their clans fought in the past but not now anymore, and Hotaru claims that Koga doesn't hate Iga, but this makes Goro ask why her father does then, but she just excuses it, not revealing it's because an Iga ninja killed his wife. But with the 24 hours given to Goro, they decide to search for Akamaki's real murderer. In the morning though, both Hotaru and Goro head to their jobs, but they know they're being followed by Iga ninjas, but agree to act normal. Otonashi meanwhile talks to Goro, who says he's being followed by Iga, and who says he feels like he doesn't believe in Iga anymore. But Otonashi tells him that that's throwing away his family, and is confused if he's covering Hotaru up or not, and warns him of the consequences. Meanwhile though, Hotaru gets visited by a Koga ninja, who hands her a code with information she requested, of the location of the drug dealer Akamaki did business with. So, Hotaru excuses herself from work early to follow this, but she notices she's being followed, but she swiftly loses their trail. Meanwhile though, Ryuhei gets visited by Kid, who came to talk about Akamaki, but which leads Ryuhei to talk about how Goro is also from Iga, thinking that Kid knew already, but she didn't, and she's very shocked. Goro meanwhile thinks on how his parents would be endangered if Iga finds out the truth, so he calls his mom, who lives remotely with his father, and to his relief she says they're fine. Though he notices that someone's trailing him and decides to run away, but ends up going to an alley. But he's suddenly pulled away and loses his chaser. But it was Kid who saved him, who reveals is Hotaru's older sister, which shocks Goro. She then takes him to Ryuhei's place, as Goro claims to feel distrust towards Iga now, but he also wants to know why Ryuhei hates Iga, despite Ryuhei's hesitance, as Goro says he's asking as Hotaru's husband, and because he wants to know more about his family. And so, he ends up telling the truth, because it's his responsibility to get his family involved. Goro's shocked, as Iga hadn't reportedly committed a murder in 100 years, but he believes him. Meanwhile though, Hotaru's tracked down, followed and recorded the drug dealer in his own base, as Hotaru then takes him and his henchmen down, ties them up, and then threatens with snapping his neck, which makes him talk about his drug deals with Akamaki, but says that he sent a middleman to get his drugs, which after Hotaru threatens him with leaking his deals, he reveals he recorded the middleman and the videos in a hard drive in his office. She later gets there to see it, but Goro then calls her, who's reluctantly heading to the Hattori building as the 24 hours are almost up, but Hotaru asks him to wait because she might find out who truly killed Akamaki. Goro's surprised, but as she's about to hang up, he reveals that he heard what happened with her mom, and that he'll help find out the truth to see if Iga's that rotten. Hotaru fears Goro might be punished, but he says he'll fight and won't let Iga hurt his family ever again. As Hotaru says they'll fight together then. As she then hangs up and checks the video of Akamaki's middleman, but which leaves her in disbelief. Goro meanwhile is about to enter the Hattori building, but Hotaru calls him, but she asks if he was with Otonashi the entire time when Akamaki died, but he remembers him heading inside the home at a moment, and that Otonashi was the first one who found him dead, because she saw that he's Akamaki's middleman and might be who might have killed him. Goro's in shock and denial, but Hotaru warns him to not go into the building as it might be a trap. But that's when he suddenly gets injected with a tranquilizer and passes out, and as Hotaru can't hear him anymore, she rushes there. As Goro later wakes up tied in a room, confronted by Iga's ninjas and Otonashi, Goro demands Otonashi an explanation, who says this is just yet another mission and wants to know what Hotaru told him that made him stop from going into the building, but which makes Goro say he wants to talk to him alone. Hotaru's meanwhile arrived camouflaged to the Hattori building, but she's seen and chased and ends up cornered until someone sets off smoke bombs and she escapes. But she sees that that someone was Yura, who tells him to follow her. Goro's meanwhile now alone with Otonashi, who asks when did Goro realize Hotaru was from Koga, and he replies that it was yesterday. Though Otonashi's just relieved that his friend's marriage problems actually had a proper reason behind them, and so he and Goro take a more relaxed stance, but Goro then says she didn't kill Akamaki, but that it was Otonashi instead, but which confuses him. Hotaru's meanwhile been taken to Ninin by Yura, as she wonders to herself if Yura is from Koga or a ninja at all. But he then straight out admits to be one, but from Iga, to her utter shock. But Yura explains that he can help her look for Akamaki's killer, explaining that his parents sent him to work at the post office to see how senior ninjas were doing, but that no one there knows he's from Iga. Though Hotaru asks how can he trust her, he says to have had doubts, but that he was actually chasing Akamaki's drug dealer too, but she got to him first and saw her beating him up and found her cool and now respects her. And so, he offers her to team up. That way, she'll get information about Iga too, which leaves her thinking. Goro meanwhile tells Otonashi that he knows he helped Akamaki with his drug deals, having been caught on tape, but Otonashi won't talk and leaves after being called by headquarters, but he's appearing worried. Hotaru's meanwhile gone to her father's place to get gear, and she has agreed to team up with Yura, while she figures that Goro's being held in the Hattori building and plans to break him out. Otonashi meanwhile meets with Matsushita and Saya, and he reveals that Goro confessed that Hotaru's from Koga, but that he only found out recently. Though it means his marriage isn't an act of betrayal, Matsushita claims that it's different if Hotaru's who killed Akamaki. But Otonashi asks what about if she's not the culprit, so he's told that divorce would be allowed, leaving Saya smiling. In the morning, she visits Goro and asks for Hotaru's location, but he won't give it, and instead asks for Otonashi to return to talk, because he suspects he's who killed Akamaki. Saya's in disbelief and says it's a lie from Hotaru, but Goro insists that he just wants to know the truth. But she claims he's changed because of Hotaru not prioritizing Iga anymore and asks him to go back to be the Goro she loved, but Goro just stares at her surprised. Meanwhile, Hotaru meets with Yura, and so she takes him to visit Otonashi's home to find evidence that he killed Akamaki, as Megumi welcomes them in under the guise of wanting to give Anzu apples, and Hotaru then says she'll use the restroom, but instead goes to Otonashi's office to try to find anything. But she gets busted by Anzu, but Yura saves the day by saying they were playing ninja hide-and-seek, which Anzu believes. They then leave, with Hotaru frustrated at not finding anything, but Yura then recommends talking to people close to Akamaki, who he can easily get in contact with, which again surprises Hotaru, and so, with her disguised as a reporter, they meet different politicians with ties to Akamaki, finding out that Akamaki had money issues and were recommended to find and talk to Akamaki's former driver. Afterwards, they take a break, but Suzume suddenly runs into them and notices it's Hotaru in disguise, but Yura simultaneously also notices that Suzume's in fact the Instagram ninja. While this happens, Otonashi's brought food to Goro and ends up untying him per Saya's instructions. They keep it civil, but Otonashi tells him that if he truly killed Akamaki, he'd have poisoned him right now. But Goro then says that he's thought about it and says that even if he did kill him, he's still his friend in the end. And because of this, Otonashi tells the truth, that he met Akamaki through his father, but he one day randomly called him, forcing him by using his family name to exchange an envelope for drugs for him. Goro believes him and is relieved, as Otonashi tells him that even if he betrays Iga, he'll still be his friend, but he can't help him if Iga condemns him, which Goro understands. Meanwhile, Saya's told Josui that Hotaru is from Koga, so Josui instructs her to capture her at all costs for Joichiro. Meanwhile, Hotaru's taken Suzume and Yura to Riwai's home, as Yura's found out that Hotaru and Suzume are sisters, while Suzume can't believe that Hotaru's teaming up with him, and while Yura finds out Suzume's an actual ninja. Though a Koga ninja then visits them, who's gotten the address of Akamaki's driver, like she requested. So, she and Yura visit the driver and interrogate him, which makes him squeak that Akamaki always drove to a remote village named Kamakusa, but Yura sees that they're building a leisure facility there now. And after the driver says he saw him meeting with someone from the parliament, Yura has him identify him. And they see that this person is Tomoyatsu Buzan, the politician Iga wanted to kill with the bomb at the charity event, to their shock. Meanwhile, Matsushita instructs Saya and Otonashi to get Hotaru's location from Goro with any method. But Yura also just gets told this info from his parents and warns Hotaru. And meanwhile, Saya goes to Goro's cell, but she tells him that like him, she's having doubts about Iga, seeing it as an old-fashioned and misogynist organization, because if she was a man, she'd have gone higher by now. saying she wants to change it, but, as Goro's wife, offering him that if he gives out Hotaru's location and marries her, he will avoid punishment and guarantee security and freedom for Hotaru, as Goro's shocked at this. But then, at night, the lights suddenly go out in the Hattori building, because Hotaru's arrived for Goro with Yura's help, who disabled the electricity. But while Hotaru tries getting him to league with her, he remembers how Aiga will just follow them for the rest of their lives, and also remembers Saya promising freedom for Hotaru if he married her. So, Goro then kisses Hotaru, but then tells her to run by herself as he locks himself in the cell again. Hotaru is confused, but has no choice but run after Yura's ran out of time and escape, and the alarms then went off. But she then, instead of leaving the building, remains standing in the lobby as the lights go back on and she gets surrounded by Aiga ninjas. But he threatens them with a gun and forces them to take her to Saya. But at that moment, Josui sees his son suffer in his coma. So, he makes a call to force everyone to find Hotaru, who at that moment meets with Saya. She asks Saya to release Goro, which she will, but only if she accepts a mission from Aiga, which is killing a person. Hotaru wakes up in her home, having been released by Aiga after she accepted their mission to free Goro, kill Tomoyatsu Bizun, but she wonders why Goro didn't escape with her. Goro's meanwhile frustrated, but Otonashi delivers him food and tells him that Hotaru was able to escape, hiding that Syed gave her an assassination mission, though which has Otonashi frustrated. Hotaru meanwhile meets again with Yura and Suzume in Ryuhei's place, as she prepares for and tells them about Aiga's mission, which shocks them as it's murder, but Yura wonders if it's because he had something up with Akamaki. Hotaru then leaves for her mission, having scouted that Tomoyatsu will give a speech at a symposium. But at that moment, Goro hears other ninjas talk about Hotaru outside his door, saying that they didn't let her escape last night, thinking they tricked Otonashi, and figures he must go help Hotaru now. But at that moment, after seeing his guards leave, he sees a camouflage sheet against a wall, because Yura's here and frees Goro, as he reveals he's also from Aiga, to Goro's utter shock, and that Hotaru's in an assassination mission given out by Aiga. They then escape after Yura flashbangs the guards and make their way out of the building while fighting Aiga ninjas, to then go to stop Hotaru from murdering someone. Though, Otonashi notices that Goro's escaped, and actually sees him run alongside Yura, but decides against stopping him and distracts his pursuers instead. Matsushita though later holds an emergency meeting as he's told that someone from Aiga helped Goro escape, which leads Saya to give the order to capture Goro and Hotaru, dead or alive. But at that moment, Tomoyatsu's giving his speech, but he suddenly feels pain and vanishes. He's then taken out, but by Kade disguised as a nurse, alongside Suzume dressed as a reporter, who then take out Tomoyatsu's bodyguards and escape in an ambulance alongside Hotaru. But while Goro and Yura have just arrived at the symposium, the girls end up taking Tomoyatsu to a warehouse, all thanks to Suzume, who ramped up the air conditioner's temperature at the symposium and gave Tomoyatsu a cold drink with sedative power. Tomoyatsu wakes up and sees the sisters as Hotaru demands to know his relationship with Akamaki, citing how they met in Kamakusa village, but Tomoyatsu feigns ignorance, which makes Hotaru inject him with poison, claiming it'll act in 30 minutes, but she'll give him the antidote if he talks. So, he reluctantly agrees to do it. Meanwhile, Saya and Otonashi are in Goro's former cell, and she freaks out, claiming that he won't let Goro help Hotaru. But Otonashi asks Saya what's wrong with herself, wanting to kill Goro and Hotaru, who might not be who killed Akamaki. But Saya yells that Goro chose Hotaru, a Koga ninja, over his clan, calling it treason. But Otonashi claims that's jealousy, saying that it said that Goro chose Hotaru over Saya. But Saya just leaves. Meanwhile, Tomoyatsu's revealing to Hotaru that Akamaki one day suddenly offered him the sale of information, but that had compromised someone from his own party, but for 30 million yens. He bought it and saw that someone from Akamaki's party was going to build a disposal site for radioactive waste in Kamakusa village, tricking its residents for it. Though he says that Akamaki wasn't involved, but he doesn't know who's behind the plan, as Akamaki died before he told him, but denies killing him because without him that information is now useless. He then asks for the antidote, but Hotaru just smashes it for being a crooked politician. But as she leaves, she reveals she just injected him with glucose, but threatens that she'll use real poison next time. But as they leaving, they suddenly see that Goro's here, who begs Hotaru to not kill for Iga, but she reveals she didn't. But instead, she's surprised to see he escaped, as he explains he did so to save her. Yura then gets there, saying that he followed their ambulance after noticing that Suzume was in it. So, Hotaru's sisters tell Goro and Hotaru to go, while holding Yura from joining them, as outside Hotaru says to be glad that he came. But Goro then says he heard about Kamakusa village from Yura and must go there. Though she worries what'll happen to Goro if he rebels against Iga, he claims he won't regret anything if he's with Hotaru. Meanwhile, Kade's left behind to deal with Tomoetsu, while Suzume and Yura go to Ryuhei's home because, per Goro's request, Yura will search in Iga's database for Sato, Hotaru's mom's murderer. Ryuhei's asked for clues, and he reveals that Sato had a scar in his hand, which Yura feels he's seen someone with one before, so he searches up an Iga party he attended 15 years ago, remembering a man with a scar in his hand saluting him, though he doesn't find the name Sato in the guest list to their frustration. Meanwhile, Goro's arrived with Hotaru at Kamakusa village, and pretending to be influencers, they ask random villagers to name a random member of parliament, and they say, Joichiro Kazutomi, the one who always visits them for the good of the village, to Goro's shock, explaining to Hotaru that he's Iga's commander-in-chief's son and father of Saya, but Goro's frustrated, asking if Joichiro's doing all these nasty things for Iga too. And while this happens, Josui's being told by his son's doctor that there's nothing left to do for Joichiro. But he then gets a call about Saya, as he then finds out that she left while taking a poisoned blade, and Josui promptly demands everyone to stop her. At night, Hotaru and Goro, now suspecting that Joichiro's who killed Akamaki, have gone to Akamaki's home to try and see how he got in. And inside his basement, they end up finding a vent behind a shelf covered with boxes, but it's a narrow one, and wonder if he even fit in it. Meanwhile, Yura's asked his parents about this scarred man from that party, and they replied, but Yura's left shocked. And as Goro and Hotaru are leaving Akamaki's home, Suzume texts her with the true identity of Sato, revealing that he was Josui Kazutomi, to Goro's disbelief, while Ryuhei vows revenge. But at that moment, Josui's unbelievably stressed, because Saya went to kill Hotaru with the poisoned blade. But Goro got in the way and received the hit himself. Goro's been stabbed by Saya, who's just then left as Hotaru's in disbelief. But then, Goro wakes up next to Hotaru, who's very relieved and hugs him, saying it's been 3 days. But Kade's also there, as they took him to an acquaintance of Kade's cabin, which Iga won't find. Though, as it's heavily snowing, they won't be able to leave today. Though, Goro claims he didn't see who attacked. And though Hotaru did, she claims she didn't either. Meanwhile, Josui's informed that Hotaru's status is unknown, but Josui hopes she's alive and instructs Matsushita to find her at any cost. And meanwhile, Suzume, who's with Yura in Ryuhei's home, is informed that Goro woke up, to her relief, but they see that Ryuhei's not here, because he's outside with one goal in mind, Josui. And while this happens, Goro and Hotaru eat lunch which they made together, and then pass the time listing their favorite foods, resting by the fireplace and sharing stories. As Goro talks about having took pride in being an Iga ninja, but in the end, he rebelled against them, and talks about how he thought he married a normal person, though Hotaru apologizes for not being one. But Goro at this says that he still thinks he made the right decision, saying that Hotaru's his destiny. And she holds his hand, with Goro saying to go somewhere far away after all this is over, which Hotaru likes the sound of. The next day, the snowfall stopped, so Hotaru and Goro continue their mission, but they're quickly pursued by Iga ninjas in the city, but who they are able to take down fighting together, but are also able to escape thanks to unexpected help. From Tomoyo, to their utter shock, because she's from Koka too, and who knew Hotaru was from Koka beforehand, being an old friend of Ryuhei. Otonashi meanwhile informs Saya that Hotaru and Goro were spotted again, to her utter shock. While Hotaru and Goro later reach Ryuhei's home and find Suzume, but they're then visited by a Koga ninja who gives her an envelope with an address. which Goro sees it's Josui's family villa. They're about to head there, but Suzune remembers that her father requested from Koga and got Hotaru an USB, which has footage of outside Akamaki's home from the day he died. And in it, they see who really killed Akamaki, shocked seeing who it truly is. And so, they then go and sneak inside Josui's villa, but Josui himself receives them, who asks Hotaru for a favor only she can do, promising to let her free if she does, as they're surrounded by ninjas, including Otonashi, to use the art of survival on Joichiro. Goro's surprised as Hotaru says to be able to do it, and says that this technique could temporarily remove his toxins and extend his life from 2 to 6 months. Josui and Saya ask her to do it, but Hotaru figures it's just so Joichiro survives enough to become prime minister, and reveals to know that Joichiro tricked the Kamakusa villagers, going to turn the village into a radioactive waste landfill as a favor to gain votes within the party, which Akamaki found out about, which had him killed, and which is why Tomoyatsu was ordered to be killed. But while Josui claims this was to fulfill Aiga's long-cherished wish of having their own prime minister, Goro claims that's not what Aiga wants, but rather what his family wants. And Hotaru then talks about how, 25 years ago, her father frustrated that dream, and so Josui killed her mother out of revenge. Saya's shocked at this, but Josui still demands Hotaru to do the technique. But she reveals she can't use it because she used it already, days ago, on Hotaru. Goro's shocked and thanks her, but Josui regardless still demands her to do it, not caring for her life, claiming that Joichiro's important for Aiga, but Goro claims this is all for his family, using Aiga for his own personal gain, calling him a murderer who treats his own as pawns, as Hotaru then shows the video of who truly killed Akamaki, Saya, who sneaked into the basement duct with her slender frame. Otonashi's shocked, and Saya just won't talk. But Josui suddenly tells Saya to give up being at Aiga after this for Joichiro, but he claims that a woman can never become the commander of Aiga, as she leaves stunned. Josui again demands Hotaru to do the technique, but she refuses, so he has his ninjas attack them, but Otonashi fights them and helps Hotaru and Goro, but Josui then holds a sword against Hotaru. But that's when Ryuhei arrives, slices Josui's sword in half, and holds him against the wall. Though Hotaru then tries consoling Saya, Saya apologizes, but Hotaru says while she can't accept that apology, she would in the future if she atones for her sins and lends her a hand which she takes. Ryuhei meanwhile tells Josui he's here for revenge, but Josui claims all he ever did was for Aiga, which Ryuhei calls rotten for employing killing. But Josui then challenges Ryuhei to kill him himself. But he saves his sword instead, claiming that Josui's thrown away the ninja's way, and so he's not worth defeating anymore. As Hotaru then tells the stunned Josui that she learned, thanks to her father, that a ninja's true heart is to protect people without anyone knowing, while what he's doing is an aberration, asking if he can now proudly say that he's a ninja. As Josui closes his eyes in shame and drops his sword, though Yura then arrives and warns that backup is coming, so Ryuhei escapes. But Hotaru then tells Goro that she also has to go, as she kisses him, telling him that she loves him, and escapes by herself. But as the backup arrives, they see that Josui's now gone, while Goro's left in shock. Afterwards, Goro's sulking in his home, wondering where Hotaru is, but he then receives a delivery, but from a Koga ninja, a package and letter from Hotaru, which he didn't notice it was Suzune delivering it. But in it, Goro finds divorce papers, alongside a letter which Hotaru wrote while Goro slept in the cabin, where she apologizes, saying her resolve would fade if she said this in person, saying that she's happy he'd abandon Aiga for her, but that she, and he, knows that that'd be impossible, and that right now, Aiga's in a bad spot, and Goro needs to be there. But that someday, when the time comes, when the hostile relationship between Aiga and Koga ends, to find normal happiness for both of them. Goro breaks into tears after seeing this letter, and then sees that in the packages are his favorite meals, which Hotaru prepared for him, as he eats them in tears. And so, 2 years then pass. Goro hasn't seen Hotaru since then. Josui's entire family was banished from the Aiga clan. As Joichiro passed away, Saya confessed to the police that she killed Akamaki, but without involving Aiga, and Josui was never seen again. and so neither was Ryuei. Though Kid was in the newspapers having become a successful horse racer, while Otonashi and Megumi were expecting another baby. And Goro kept working at Iga in the post office alongside Yura, and Otonashi was now its new chief. But the new commander-in-chief was Makiko Yura, the mother of Yura, who's determined to taking Iga out of its old-fashioned traditions. Afterwards, Goro goes with Otonashi and Yura to Ninin, as Yura sees that Suzume's gotten 1 million followers online now. But he reveals he's not dating her, but someone else, from Koga, to their surprise, as Yura says that it's not the time for ninjas to fight each other and they'd have peace. And so, Goro then decides to go on a camping trip by himself, next to a lake. But someone suddenly approaches him, of course, none other than Hotaru. And after all this time, they hug each other again.